millions of users, this session is for you. So with that thought, let's welcome Sanjeev on that stage and with huge round of applause.
So good evening all of you. Am I audible? Really? Yes. So my name is Sanjeev Dalal. I'm part of Airtel Network. I've been part of Airtel Network for the last 25 years, working across different technologies, which includes core network, radio network, access network. So I'll be touching upon telecommunication network today, and I'll be talking about the security aspects of a telecommunication network. Before I start with my slide deck, let me give you a brief background of what all is there in the telecommunication network. We broadly classify the telecommunication network is divided into three parts. One is the radio access network, and then we have a core network wherein all services are being provisioned. And then radio access network is connected to the core network with a transport network, which is MPLS or ISP pipes, etc. Core network carries all the services platform. Majority of the crown jewels are sitting in the core network. Radio access network provides the access to the consumer access point to the telecommunication network for utilizing of services is via radio network, which is over frequency radio waves. So there are certain vulnerabilities which are there in the radio network. There are certain vulnerabilities across which are there in the core network. I'll be touching upon those subjects today, along with the evolution of 5G network and its associated threat landscape. So let's understand there are two broadly kind of environments in any telecommunication service provider. One is the IT environment and another is the telecom infrastructure environment. IT environment primarily is hosting OSS, billing system, customer relationship management system, data warehousing system, and management of user workstations. And telecommunication part of a TSP includes your radio, core, and the transport networks. We talk about priorities. Priority of an IT network is avoiding the data theft, avoiding the theft of personal identifiable information, avoiding ransomware, crypto miners, protecting the desktops, DLPs, etc. When you talk about telecommunication network, the prime priority is operational continuity of the services. We have to ensure, because now telecommunication network is nothing less than water and electricity. It is a national information infrastructure of the nation. In case telecommunication network is down, your digital economy or your national economy can actually have at a serious risk. So when you talk about the main components in an IT security, talks about user machine, laptops, mobile devices, intranet, etc. But telecommunication network includes purpose-built network, which carries core network, radio network, and the access network I talked about. And then we talked about the protocols. Primarily IT, the protocols include TCP/IP or the TLS as part of the transport layer protection. But when you talk about telecommunication network, it is the application which are particularly designed to operate network in terms of connectivity, in terms of voice call management, session management, data session management. The protocols include SSM, diameter, and GTP. I'll talk about these protocols and the associated vulnerabilities in my subsequent slides. Regulatory landscape. IT is primarily governed by the regulations like PCI DSS, GDPR, data protection, etc. Telecommunication network security regulations are primarily done and released by 3GPP, GSMA, and local regulatory bodies. So there is huge contribution from the local regulatory bodies in governance of telecommunication regulatory guidelines, which include DOT, which includes National Cyber Security Center, which includes NSCDS, etc. Key compliance requirements are uniform. What are key compliance requirements of any infrastructure? There has to be periodic risk assessment of the infrastructure. Then implement sufficient security controls at different layers of the network, at the perimeter, at user access control, encryption controls. Then third part is you have to develop the security operations center integrating all your log sources and implement threat monitoring use cases around this. And the last piece is establish a regular security risk assessment and the security audits. So risk assessment is very critical because your threat landscape is not static. It keeps on evolving with the evolving technologies, with the evolving services. So regular risk assessment and regular conduction of security audits is very, very critical so that we can be at pace with the threat actor. Typical mindset of a hacker versus a defender. Hackers don't follow rules, they used to exploit the gaps so that they can compromise the system. Defender has the motivation of protecting the critical information infrastructure while they has to operate at a scale. Telecommunication infrastructure at India, barring China, this is the biggest scale in the world. The other countries have small networks, and such a large scale network management of security around such a large threat landscape is very, very challenging, and this is one of the biggest challenge for a defender. Motivations are around financial gain, conducting the espionage, insider threats. Defender prime motivation is he has to prepare, respond, and lastly to recover from cyber threats. If any attack happens, then defender role is to recover the network apart from protecting the network. Typical techniques, procedures utilized by hackers are social engineering, phishing, deepfakes. Deepfakes are very common now, utilizing AI technology, zero-day exploitation, supply chain attacks, and then lateral movements. Defender key techniques are around zero trust architecture, building SOC solution, utilization of EDR and NDR technologies to improve the threat anomaly detections, etc. And lastly, quick response time. Whenever we got an attack, then defender has to recover the network quickly so the services can be restored. So I'll talk about how telecommunication network evolved from generation to generation. We started with 1G, which was primarily analog voice. Then system moved to 2G for bringing the digital voice in 1990. And then 3G came, which added the data services for the consumer. 4G era was primarily around the smartphones, which enabled all the OTT consumptions on the move on the smartphones. And then 5G is all about connecting the world. It is not about connecting everyone, but connecting everything. It is beyond connecting the users, but it is the IoT evolution. All the devices now coming onto the network. All the devices are talking to the network. They have the communication need. So how the network vulnerabilities look like in 2G era? 2G, I'll explain. I'll spend a couple of minutes on IMSI catcher. IMSI catcher is one of the potential vulnerability in radio access network, wherein a fake base station can be set up in the vicinity of a target, and then you can force that guy to latch on that fake base station. What is the objective? Objective is to get the location interception, get the data interception. This is typical man in the middle attack when a user is connected to a rogue base station. Because of, there are a couple of challenges in 2G networks, which then SS7 vulnerabilities is another challenge in 2G network, wherein SS7 protocol is being used for connecting a home network to a visited network. In mobile communication, user is in roaming. For example, I am in India right now because I go to UK, then I will latch onto a UK network. So UK network connectivity with home network is being done over SS7 network. There are messages which are exchanged between the two networks for establishment of roaming. These messages are exploited by the bad actors for conducting of some exploitation. So what are the typical controls in 2G? 2G we can upgrade to the superior encryption. We can allocate a temporary IMSI. IMSI is a permanent subscriber identifier in a mobile communication. Any user has, one is the MSISN, which is a mobile number we all know. Second is the identity, which is utilized in the network itself, which is called International Mobile Subscriber Identity, IMSI. So in case we propagate this IMSI in a clear text to the radio network, there is a possible chance of intercepting this IMSI. Protection control include, instead of sending in clear text IMSI every time, you send a temporary IMSI. This is one control which protects from the IMSI catcher. When you go into 3G was the network when mutual authentication was introduced. Since a rogue network can latch a particular user for his interception, so the concept of mutual authentication was introduced in 3G so that One is the mobile station is authenticated with the radio network. Radio network is also authenticated with the mobile station as part of mutual authentication. This enhances the control of around the IMSI catcher. Then we talk about 4G. 4G another name is LT network, long-term evolution. When LT was introduced, another protocol came into picture, which is diameter. Diameter protocol is used as a replacement to SS7 as part of messages exchange between the roaming operators, LT roaming, data roaming, etc. So controls around this diameter messages exploitation was built with the form of diameter firewall, and the controls implementation at the diameter edge agent. Diameter edge agent is a device which integrates at the edge from your home network to the roaming network. Then, because the IoT starts coming in, the data consumption was huge, so denial of service attacks were on the rise, and then anti-DDoS controls were introduced in the core network. Core network elements include the CGNet, which does the IP address translation from public IP address to the private IP address, and then at the DNS which resolves whatever the user types in his browser. This address is resolved by a system called DNS to the IP address. So DNS controls were introduced as part of the security controls around this. So what is 5G? 5G, when we introduce, one is 5G is protected at the radio layer with the introduction of identifier called SUPI and SUKI. I talked about we are sending IMSI in the clear text as part of a registration process. But when in the case of 5G, to avoid IMSI catcher, a concept of subscriber concealed identifier was introduced. As part of this, instead of sending the clear text IMSI, we are sending a concealed identifier, and thus this technology is protecting against the IMSI catcher exploits. But 5G is not about securing the radio network. 5G is also introducing the new concept called network slicing use cases. It brings up the open up of the architecture. It brings up exposure of network interfaces towards the external party as part of open API architecture. It brings up cloud infrastructure technologies, because for implementation of slicing is a virtual chunk of network resource created for a particular service. So since this virtual resources need to be created, the infrastructure has to be also hosted on the virtualized infrastructure. So there comes the concept of introduction of cloud infrastructure and the NFA infrastructure. This addition of all these changes with the 5G introduction expanded the threat landscape. And now the counter controls around these additional changes in the 5G technologies has to be implemented. The controls are around, for example, we introduced containers and VMs. So minimum baseline and hardening of these containers and infrastructure should be done. Then we talked about we are exposing the network as part of API interface based network instead of closed network. So TLS controls and OAuth controls need to be introduced. Network slicing are coming. So see, the infrastructure is now getting opened up, so we need to strengthen our SOC monitoring with the AI-based threat detection techniques, which includes EDR, NDR, and container security. See, we summarize 2G, 3G, and 4G use of plain text IMSI in initial registration process. IMSI catcher was there. In 5G networks, we introduced SUPI and SUKI, so it protects from the IMSI catcher. I have summarized the different controls around 2G, 3G, and 4G. What are the encryption controls, signaling security, and the IMSI protection. Now we'll spend a couple of minutes on internet security. Interconnect is wherein the roaming partners, the roaming countries are being tied up so that the customers can roam between each other's countries. So we'll set up the background of this, how this evolved. SSM and diameter are the primarily protocols which are utilized for exchange of roaming messages, setting up of call session between roaming networks. Then SS7 protocol is primarily used for 2G and 3G. 4G network works on the diameter. GTP protocol is an additional protocol which is used between setup of data session from a roaming network and the home network. Then there are certain set of exposure around these particular interfaces, which is SS7 diameter and GTP. Camel interface is there for the prepaid roaming. HTTP2 is coming in the 5G SC and OMN. So what does it lead to? It lead to these particular risks. Somebody location can be tracked by exploitation of these messages. SMS can be intercepted. Call interception. Impersonation is call spoofing. Somebody can make a call on behalf of or send a SMS on behalf of you. Session hijacking. Denial of service. So what is the counter control around this? Can we protect this? Yes. So in this slide I am explaining how a location is being retrieved. There is a message called map API. Anytime interrogation. This message is a category 1 message. Category 1 messages are these kind of messages which are only exchanged between the home network. It doesn't exchange by the distant network. If we end up allowing this message on our interconnection, somebody from the foreign country can send a map API message and then get a location of the user. So, second category is category 3. Category 3 are the messages which need to be exchanged between the roaming partners. For example, I'll just explain the concept of location update. Any user, when he's in roaming, he always sends a location update message to the home network so that home network is aware of where the user is, so that call and SMS can be routed. This message has to be allowed, but the same message can be exploited for doing the call interception, SMS interception. How? I can send a fake location update from a rogue GP connected in the foreign network operator. Fake location update will lead to the routing of that SMS to the fake MSC VLR, and the threat actor is attached to that fake MSC VLR and can get your SMS intercepted. So this is serious actually, and then how we counter it. We counter it with the introduction of a multi-protocol firewall which is carrying the processing of SS7, diameter and GTP messages. How it happens? For example, somebody is in Goa right now and send a location update to my home network. I'm coming from Delhi, so I send a location update message to my Delhi home network. After 10 minutes, I'm getting a message from African country that Sanjeev is in roaming in Africa. So, customer cannot go in 10 minutes from say Goa to Africa by any chance. This is the logic of velocity check. So we introduce the velocity check in the firewall. This will protect the illegitimate location update messages to the home network so that your SMS cannot be routed to a fake GT and threat actor can compromise your SMS. This is not the theory. We'll share some numbers. These are the numbers. On SS7, we roughly in a month we're blocking around 20 million of messages which are fraudulent in nature and trying to conduct this kind of frauds on the customer. GTP diagram. We talked about all these firewall, and there is sufficient amount of messages which are getting blocked in the network level so as to protect our consumer for these kind of scams or frauds happening to our consumer. So how 5G evolved? So 5G primarily evolved from a closed network to a cloud native based network. It introduced service based architecture. Earlier used to be static interfaces between different network functions. Now it's an HTTP based interface between all network applications like EMF, SNF, UPF. They talk to each other over a standard HTTP interface. Control plane and user plane separation was introduced in 4G also, and then it is further going down in the 5G network. What is control and user plane? Primarily control plane is around signaling data and the user plane is actual payload data of user. But whether it is voice call and the data browsing or the YouTube or OTT or browsing, this is the payload data. So data plane is separate, control plane is separate so that scalability of the network can be handled separately for this signaling and the messages. And then as we talked about, it is now an API based architecture. So API security controls also need to be in place for the 5G network. So how threat landscape and the security landscape should evolve in telecommunication network. Since we talked about, we are adding cloud-based infrastructure now. Earlier, the infrastructure which used to be on a bare metal solution or the purpose-built hardware, now all the telecommunication applications are coming on the cloud infrastructure and the container-based architecture. connected devices are increasing. Earlier, our networks used to serve only human users. Now there are billions and billions of devices which are coming in the form of NB-IoT or the red cap IoT, which we'll be seeing in the future, which is the reduced capability IoTs in terms of variables which carrying the SIM, and then you can record something on the move. Then open network APIs, supply chain. So, and as a telecommunication service provider, we source a lot of equipment from our different vendors, and we source a lot of services also from our different suppliers. So there are certain threat landscape around this. Whatever you buy and deploy, there are certain controls you need to be put in. Then AI is being heavily leveraged now by the threat actors, including deepfakes, AI-driven malwares, and botnets, etc. Open source software adaptation and evolution of quantum computers. Quantum computers is one topic wherein your traditional encryption will not suit in the future, wherein the quantum computers will come into the existence. So this is the landscape of threat which is expanding. Now, if I summarize what we should do as a telecom service provider in the summary, I will divide this all security control requirement into 3 different buckets. First is the strategic security controls. Strategic security controls talk about we need to understand our attack surface, what all assets we have, what all interfaces we have, what all different call flows in that particular interfaces, and then review in detail and then apply respective controls. Unless until you don't know what is your overall asset landscape and the services landscape, it is always practically impossible to apply the respective controls. Complexity. Networks are very, very complex, and there is a motivation now in terms of reducing the network complexity. As network complexity is reduced, it is easier for SOC guys to put the required controls. Threat intelligence collaboration is very key, because some attack happens in any other country. If it is being proactively shared across all the other countries or all the other operators, it is very, very easy for others to operate, to put these required controls proactively. Implementation of security controls at different layers. It doesn't mean that you put your perimeter and you are fine. You have to put the controls at different layers, which includes perimeter, which includes your deployment of user access control, which includes your EDR and DR type of controls, which includes your DLPs. So there are different layers. So one layer security controls will not help. Resilience in the network, I talked about. One is we have to avoid the incident. Secondly is whenever any incident happens, how quickly you recover your network. So there is a need to build sufficient resiliency in the networks. Investment is required to build the resiliency, and we as an Intel are heavily cautious about this and investing in that. Risk management. So conduction of regular risk assessment and management and acceptance of risk and mitigation of risk is very critical, and supply chain I talked about. Now when we translate these controls into technology-centric controls, we talked about we need to put the hardening controls around cloud and virtualization. Then malware protection, how you protect your infrastructure from any malware infection and lateral movements. Signaling security I talked about, we have invested in SS7 diameter and GTP firewalls so as to protect our consumer from these particular attacks. Enabling services security. There are a couple of services which are utilized in telecommunication network like BGP, DNS. Put required controls around these technologies. So that BGP route injection, false route injection is one of the exploits which is done to route the traffic to another destination so as to intercept the traffic. Mobile device management with threat hunting. There are emerging controls in the coming future. The technology which is going to emerge is AI is emerging now. Threat actors are heavily using. To counter this, we also are investing in AI. Quantum computing I talked about. Network slicing will be coming in the form of 5G, advanced 5G and 6G use cases, API security and 6G evolution. This is, we summarize all the security controls around network. We summarize into 3 buckets, which is this all about. Yeah. So I'll touch upon one of the problems which telcos have. Telco workloads are, we talked about EDR solution in the couple of other presentations also. But in telecom environment, deployment of EDR is very, very critical and very, very challenging. None of the operators across the globe has significant footprint of EDR on the telco workloads. We as a Airtel has taken a forward call and deployed EDR so as to have better visibility around network workloads in terms of any malware infection. Without EDR or without any host level monitoring or detection or protection solution, it is very, very difficult to manage security. So EDR is one very, very critical tool which is to be deployed as part of future AI-based or behavior-based capability. Then there are some legacy infrastructure around telecom, wherein or some customized build operating system, wherein EDR deployment is not possible. So how we handle that? We deploy an NDR solution which monitors the traffic for any anomaly, which monitors the traffic for any lateral movements, and then accordingly help us to build the next generation SOC so that we can have a better monitoring around our infrastructure. So what does it lead to? It actually enables us to have a better behavior analysis in terms of user behavior analysis or in terms of traffic behavior analysis. What are the traffic movements happening across the network? End node behavior analysis in the form of EDR, that whatever any actions, bad actions are happening, which are typically of a nature of a threat actor, EDR helps in that. So these all solutions help us to build a smart network telecom centric SOC utilizing these technologies. What are the key best practices which should be followed for a secure telecom infrastructure deployment? Secure by design. Whenever we evaluate any product or any technology, apart from functional requirements, the security requirements also should be evaluated, should be factored, annual requirements, and accordingly should be implemented on the very first day as part of onboarding a technology or a product. Defense in depth. Implement layered security controls at every layer, like securing your interconnect with the SSM firewall, segmentation of your network by creating separate zones. Then put up your identity management solution, firewalls, IPS, IDS, EDR, LDRs, etc. Least privilege access. Any user should be given the access only basis what he needs. We end up granting most privileged access to the user in terms of simplification of the job, but that is not actually the need of the hour. It has to be on a least privilege basis. User rights should be validated, and then regular security assessment should be done across the network so that you can keep up the pace with the evolving threat landscape. Regular patching and vulnerability management. Please review your vulnerabilities regularly and patch them proactively so that the bad guy cannot exploit them. Threat monitoring, we talked about deploy AI-based anomaly detection and solution, use SIM tools and monitor real-time detection, real-time threats and abnormal behavior by integration of your threat intelligence sources. Minimize time to your response plans should be so much smart so that you can come out of the incident. You should have documented response plans. You should have resiliency built into your network. So this is how Airtel infrastructure telecom SOC looks. So we have a dedicated telecom infrastructure SOC. We have a dedicated IT enterprise SOC. What we have in Security Operations Center? We have 24/7 security monitoring. We talked about. We have implemented air gap, which ensures there is no file or any payload can be routed from a user workstation to the network node. EDR NDR technologies we deployed SS7 firewalls. We have a security operations and automation framework. Minimum time to respond. In that case, a traditional SOC analyst or a SOC incident guy will talk to the other functions. It introduces a lot of process waste. So to cut down that process waste, the utilization of SOAR frameworks is very, very critical. It integrates with the different platforms and can run the playbooks and cut down the time to respond. The last but not the least is the GRC. You have invested in so much technologies, you have invested in designing so much processes, you have invested in everything, but unless until it is being implemented on ground by respective function, it is entire waste. So close governance of security is very, very critical. And this governance is not across the security team, it is across all the different functions. Every function, every individual in the entire organization is responsible for ensuring security of the network. It is not the role of only a security guy. So security guy, now the critical role is how effectively he govern this implementation of controls across the other parties. Risk assessment, regular risk assessment, and we as a telco are obligated to certain compliance requirements. So regular assessment of our compliance postures around this all constitute the GRC track. Now I'll touch upon another aspect, which is consumer security and the privacy. All of us, we are saying, must be receiving a lot of spam calls, spam calls on a daily basis. What is spam call? Spam is an unwanted communication which I don't require. That is in the form of an SMS or a voice call. This is very, very troubling for the human user. Now, there are some motivations around spam calls. One is pushing a campaign to the user. Second category of spam calls is it ultimately lead to a scam, financial scam to the user. People do phishing activities on these phone calls, and then this may lead to scam of the user. This is a big challenge for the society. Our government has been so much cautious about this, worried about this. Our minister, Mr. Sindhia, has been talking about this in the most of the meeting that this is a big issue. TRI has been blocking so many numbers, the SIM numbers which are purchased in bulk connections and then utilized for doing these spam calls. 60% of the people, their numbers around we analyze, there are 60% of the people receive more than 3 spam calls per day. 87% of the citizens are receiving a spam message on a daily basis. And majority of the spam follows with a scam, more than $3 billion fraud happening. Yeah. So this is a big issue for the society. There are two kinds of spam messages which are happening. One is the commercial communication route and another is the P2P communication route. Commercial communication, I'll explain a bit on the commercial communication. There are certain telemarketers which registers themselves as a commercial service provider. And there is a principal entity, for example, Nike, Adidas, etc. These are called principal entities, which are willing to send the campaigns to the user. And second guy is the telemarketer, which picked up this campaign business and sent this message to the human user via operator pipes. There was a big issue around this commercial communication. I am as a user can register my preference that I want this kind of commercial communication but don't require this, or I don't want this commercial communication at all. This preference is set at the TRI website, but this preference was not followed by the existing process of commercial communication. I talked about there is a subscriber, end subscriber, then there is a telecom service provider to whom this subscriber is connected. We have a regulator like TRI who controls this commercial communication. There is a principal entity like HDFC Bank, Nike or Adidas who need to send this commercial communication. Then there is a telemarketer who does the aggregated business for this commercial communication. Big challenge around the commercial communication, 76% of the messages were sent from the TSP gateway which were unsolicited, which means I don't want these messages but I am getting these messages. Why? Because the system was weak. Potential challenges, subscribers were getting unwanted SMS calls at the odd hours. Government sees there was a leakage of privacy issue in terms of customer preferences, and then telecom service providers were having no transparency around resolution of this complaint. How we solve this? We utilize the technology, you all are aware, blockchain technology. Why we utilize this blockchain technology? Because in India there are at least 4 operators who are doing the telecommunication services. So any telemarketer getting blocked at one operator then try to shift to another operator. So there was a need of a joint database system among all the TSPs so that there has to be a 360-degree governance around this process. So there comes the concept of blockchain. We introduce a blockchain-based solution around the telecommunication network, which actually help to control this unwanted communication. What is blockchain? In a blockchain, if you talk about technically, a transaction is requested and authenticated, a block of the transaction is generated and sent to all the parties. Every party then acknowledges this block and add it into the entire value chain. And this is how the transaction is complete. So I'm just sharing a stat with the blockchain implementation. We have roughly around 1300 million messages which are sent through this platform in a day. Out of that, 35 million messages are being blocked, effectively, which are not fitting into the blockchain rules. 61% of the messages which are getting blocked, that message could not be sent due to preferences sent by the subscriber. Subscriber don't want this message, but was been sent earlier. This problem is solved of this commercial communication via implementation of the blockchain technology. So such a relief for our consumer in terms of getting unwanted messages. Now, story doesn't end here. When we implemented this control, the spam messages shifted to P2P. People start buying bulk connections and then utilizing this bulk SIM instead of commercial communication route to start sending these messages. What all positive results we got from the bulk chain DLT based solution? We have a now secure registration process where there is a centralized system where any telemarketer has to register a proper CLI, proper content signature, proper URLs upfront, register the URL, what all need to be sent to the consumer. Enhanced traceability. Any unwanted message goes to any user, there is a very, very enhanced traceability around this. Real-time monitoring, decentralized security. There is no single system now. Any system even get compromised or some services are affected, the other systems can ensure the continuity of the services. Spam and fraud prevention, I talked about in my previous slide, there are large number of messages which are blocked now because of user doesn't want them, and regulatory compliance. So this, after solving this problem shifted to mobile. So we have been talking about AI. AI, if we talk about few years back, for me personally, it was primarily a buzzword. Every partner, every people claim I have an AI in my solution. Now, when ChatGPTs, Geminis of the world started coming in the picture, then we started realizing AI is now need of the life. AI can impact all of our lives in a positive manner in terms of utilization of this technology. And we at Airtel also truly believe in power of AI. So we utilize this technology in building a product called Spam Shield. Spam Shield is a product wherein we analyze billions and billions of calls and SMS on a real-time basis and against more than 200 parameters of the call pattern and plot these callers as spammer on a real-time basis and display on the user mobile. This is the power of AI we utilize and capitalize to make an impact in our customer life in a very, very positive manner. What customers see is a service, but in behind there is a powerful AI engine which monitors such a large volume of data and on a real-time basis plotting this as a potential spammer onto the call. 1.5, what is the scale we are talking about? We are processing 1.5 billion SMS daily. We are processing 2.5 billion calls on a daily basis. And the latency is less than 2 milliseconds. On a real-time basis, you might be seeing on your mobile, there is a flash called Airtel Warning Spam. We print on that. This is done with this help of this particular product. And I have been talking to a lot of customers, and really they are so happy about this product that this has changed their lives drastically in terms. Thank you.
Yes.
So, what we monitor? We monitor the velocity of the calls. We monitor D&D complaint, volume of calls made. Typically, a spammer will be static, will not be moving. A spammer will be making outgoing calls, not incoming calls. So such to give a glimpse, these are one of the parameters. Robocalling. This is not a normal call, this is a robocall. Right? There is no data usage happening, but only voice and SMS is happening. So such kind of parameters are being analyzed by our AI-based engine to plot that caller as a potential spammer. This is such a powerful tool. This is how it looks like to the end user. On the Android phone or on the iPhone, it displays as Airtel warning spam message. On the SMS, we show as additional text in front of the message that there is a potential spam. So this is the journey so far. We have 0.8 billion of messages, calls, which has been detected, and user now 92% of the calls, user doesn't now respond, which are reflected with the Airtel warning message. This is the story so far on this, and this really helps us to improve our consumer life in a very positive manner. Thank you.
Any questions?
Hello. First of all, thanks a lot. You covered a lot of ground in this single session. Very difficult to do that. Quick 2 words about me. I work for a company called NetTracker, if you know about that. So we are a product provider for telecom service provider. We are working.
Can you be louder, please?
Sure. I'm working for a company called NetTracker.
Yeah.
We are a vendor for telcos, and we work on cloud native solutions. And one of the areas you mentioned, 5G and cloud native, that's pretty much of our interest for us. So questions in that direction. So are you already having cloud native 5G core functions?
Yeah.
And are you exploring or already deployed Open RAN or O-RAN kind of solutions in your network? And what are your thoughts about their security? For example, if we understand how to do cloud native security for IT applications, what will be the challenges to take it to carrier grade or the network kind of security that you just now spoke of?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So to answer your first question, we are utilizing Red Hat OpenShift as part of our cloud native deployments, Kubernetes. Yeah. So majority of the workloads for the 5G core are on the cloud native deployment already. So there are minimum baselines defined around deployment, secure deployment of this container or the NAV infrastructure, so as to protect the threat landscape around this. Secondly, second question was around Open RAN. So we have not gone full blown into Open RAN. We tried to some initial footprint in terms of some sample sites utilizing Open RAN, disaggregating your RAN components into CU, etc., and utilizing OpenShift at the central site and then using the radio at the site. But this has not actually gone into much larger scale. It is only in the trial phase right now. Yeah.
Yeah, and the third question was actually if we have to take the cloud native security in data center to Open RAN kind of scale, what challenges do you see?
See, whatever the controls you put in your core infrastructure, say core infrastructure is concentrated around, say, hundreds of sites. But when it blow up to radio, you will be having much larger infrastructure. But again, this will get evolved to edge, not at the radio side, because your central unit will get at the edge, not at the every base station side.
Okay.
Like your core function will lies at the edge. So edge will be multiplication into thousands of sites in terms of low latency kind of application requirement.
Right.
Yeah. I hope it answers.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Any other question? Okay. With that note, thank you so much, Sanjeev, for such an informative session.